Welcome back. President Trump is playing three-dimensional chess, you say. Okay. This week he announced tariffs against our fiercest rivals: Canada, Mexico, Great Britain, Germany, and France. Meanwhile, the president is making the case for Russia to rejoin the G7. You might remember they were kicked out after invading Crimea. And there was the matter, or no matter apparently, of Russia interfering in the 2016 presidential election. Friends, enemies, rivals, what's in the name? After the G7, Trump is off to Singapore to meet with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. No sweat. The president says he didn't need much prep. Joining us for more are Kevin Griffith of the Sarasota Democratic Party, Ken Piper, the treasurer of the Manatee Republican Party, and Dan Maduri of AM 820 Florida Live in Tampa. And Dan, let me start with you. You know how the whole thing looks with the G7 and Russia and the tariffs against France. What's your take?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with simply does not care about anything regarding the optics, especially not in the traditional sense. I mean, here you have President Trump, who, honest to God, had the Russian delegation inside the White House a day after the Mueller investigation was launched, a day after all of the bombshells with Russia were being dropped. So he doesn't care about traditional optics. He's going to do whatever it is he feels like he's going to do. And it's up to the president to decide what is his foreign policy package going to be. President, it's foreign policy, it's completely absolute. So he has a right to make these decisions. He has a right to make these calls. And frankly, he doesn't care about political fallout.
Kevin, your take?
Well, it's important to remember Russia was removed from the G7, one, because they invaded Crimea, but two, because they shot down a commercial airline, I believe it was MH17. It just seems to me that for some reason, President Trump likes to appease Russia more than backing the people of America. And the question is, what is his goal? I mean, what is the purpose for this? I don't know.
Ken, earlier this week, the president accused Canada of burning down the White House in 1812, which of course was not true. It was the British. Do you make sense of any of this?
Well, I think the one thing that I do make sense of is the fact that President Trump may be headed in the right direction when he's saying that this is being done for national security reasons. Let's not forget about Uranium One was a Canadian company.
Hold on one second. I mean, Canada has sent men and women into battle on our behalf after 9/11, and they remain fighting on our behalf in Afghanistan today. How could you say that whatever Canada does is a national security threat?
I think when you can speak of Canada as a military ally on the one hand, and perhaps not necessarily strictly aligned with us economically on the other hand. And I think the same thing applies to Mexico. They are not exactly our friends when we have thousands of people pouring across the borders. That is not in the interest of the security of the United States.
I keep on remembering that song from the cartoon show, Blame Canada.
You know, it's inexplicable when we look at Canada and Canada and Mexico now being our adversaries. These are our allies, and trade is important. It benefits us all. It makes our products cheaper. It helps us with our employment. I just don't understand what his goal is here.
Okay. Welcome back. We are talking about the week in Washington and politics, and joining us for more are Kevin Griffith of the Sarasota Democratic Party, Ken Piper, the treasurer of the Manatee Republican Party, and Dan Maduri of AM 820 Florida Live in Tampa. And Dan, let me start with you. This is what the president said as he was leaving the White House today en route to Canada.
Whether you like it or not, and it may not be politically correct, but we have a world to run. And in the G7, which used to be the G8, they threw Russia out. They should let Russia come back in.
You know, Dan, I would imagine that makes a lot of sense from that perspective. On the other hand, one analyst said today one of Russia's principal foreign policy goals for decades has been to split the United States from its allies, whether by accident or by design. President Trump appears intent on bringing that dream to fruition. Your reaction?
Well, my reaction is quite simple. I do think that he wants Russia to be back. I think that he truly does believe that there is no there. That's an exact text message that one of Robert Mueller's right-hand man in the investigation did in fact send to his lover. He believes there's no there. He's feeling more emboldened the more this investigation carries out. He thinks that it's going to be over before the midterms. If nothing is found before the midterms, that's going to be a major coup for the Republican Party. And he wants Russia to be at the table because he believes that everyone should, in fact, have a voice. He said he's going to meet with anyone. He's meeting with Kim Jong-un. I mean, we've seen presidents do this kind of thing in the past, just not to this type of degree of scrutiny.
Kevin, fair enough?
Whatever you think about collusion, about the investigation leading to collusion, every U.S. intelligence agency, everyone that's investigated this, has said that Russia meddled in the 2016 election. And they also say they want to meddle in this upcoming midterm elections. And our president wants to bring them into the fold, not make them a pariah state. This is a big problem when the top of our country, the leader of our country, is embracing a foreign entity that is trying to meddle with our democracy.
Ken, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the president say, no collusion. I've heard a lot of Republicans say, no collusion, show me the evidence. But as you know, prosecutors don't tell the public what their evidence is in a criminal investigation until and unless they file criminal charges.
And what has taken them a year and a half to get to that point?
Watergate took 2 years.
I don't think for charges to be filed. We still do not have.
We've had over a dozen criminal charges being filed.
Well,
already.
we do not have one charge filed that would indicate there was any collusion between the president and his campaign and Russia. We have no evidence whatsoever of that. And interestingly enough, this case is being tried in the press. It really isn't being tried in the court where it belongs.
Well, I mean, hold on one second. I mean, has the special counsel said anything in the press? Has he leaked anything that you're aware of?
Oh, no, he doesn't leak it. He gives it to the New York Times to leak.
You're saying special counsel Mueller gives it to the New York Times?
Apparently, someone in his office is giving...
I've never heard that before. I've never heard a Republican or a Democrat claim before that that the Mueller investigation has leaked anything. Let me just get one more thing in here. Congressman Tom Rooney, who represents this area now, says, quote, what is the point of saying that there was a spy in the campaign when there was none? You know what I'm saying? It's like create this thing to tweet about knowing it's not true. This is a conservative Republican who represents our area.
Yes. Well, whenever anybody mentions anything about spies, I think of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which I have right here, that says all of us are to be secure in our homes and in our papers. Now, someone...
Hold on just 1 second. I don't know what that quite means, but I do know we have to take a break. We're just getting warmed up, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back. We are talking about the week in politics, and joining us for more are Kevin Griffith of the Sarasota Democratic Party, Ken Piper, the treasurer of the Manatee Republican Party, and Dan Maduri of AM 820 Florida Live in Tampa. And Ken, let me start with you. After the president may be leaving Canada after day one of the G7 summit because he's not too happy to be there in the first place, but he's heading to a historic summit in Singapore with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. He did say that he really did not find much need to prep for this in a way he's been prepping for his entire life, which does have a lot of people, concerned about this is really complicated stuff and nothing is on the line except for possible nuclear war.
And I can think of no better person to be conducting complicated negotiations than the great negotiator himself, Donald Trump. There's many issues that are involved here. Everybody's focusing on North Korea. North Korea isn't the real object. It most certainly isn't the sole object. China is using North Korea as its pawn. China is interested in controlling the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the Sea of Japan. They've set up nuclear bases in these islands that they've created in the South China Sea. It's specifically so that they have all the nuclear weapons and no one else does. North Korea says they don't mind denuclearizing the peninsula. It's not North Korea that's denuclearizing, it's China that's denuclearizing.
Kevin, it seems like complicated stuff to me.
I do worry about Trump's deal-making ability. Ask the people of Atlantic City about his deal-making ability. But I will say I'm an American first before I'm a Democrat, and I do want peace, and I do hope for the success of the negotiations. And whether it's Donald Trump or some other president, if they're able to bring peace to that region, and the people of North Korea, through no fault of their own, seem to be living in abject poverty, then all the better. But I do worry about Trump wanting to get a deal and being able to go out there and shake hands and have the photo op more than the details, and concentrating on what the actual deal is. And remember, this is the same guy who said when President Obama was able to strike a deal with Iran, well, it was a bad deal. Well, no, for 10 years they weren't allowed to develop nuclear weapons. That's a pretty good deal.
Dan, I'm going to switch topics on you. We're going to talk about Scott Pruitt, the EPA administrator. A lot of the folks on your side of the aisle love talking about draining the swamp, but the EPA administrator has had a little bit of a week. In fact, he's had a lot of little bits of a week. This is what the president had to say today.
Scott Pruitt is doing a great job within the walls of the EPA. I mean, we're setting records. Outside, he's being attacked very viciously by the press, and I'm not saying that he's blameless, but we'll see what happens.
So just this week, he's sending his security detail out to find special lotion for him. That's after sending folks out to try to buy used mattresses from the Trump Hotel. That's after staying in an apartment belonging to a lobbyist. And don't forget the booth of secrecy in the EPA office. Why does this man still have a job?
Well, I think it's interesting. I do think that Pruitt charges now, or allegations, they're up to 12. I was hoping for one more to get that baker's dozen number in there. The booth of secrecy doesn't really concern me. That is kind of a thing on Capitol Hill. A lot of people do in fact have that, and do in fact use that and implement that in their day-to-day practice. But where are these types of ideas learned by a Scott Pruitt? I mean, you have to remember, here's a guy from Oklahoma who basically was the attorney general, then had just basically Oklahoma state seats. Why does he get this such entitlement surrounding him? I mean, this is something I don't understand. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, I get it. I mean, he has $100, $200, $300 million in the bank. He wants to fly private. You understand that he doesn't want to change his lifestyle in order to work in the government. You kind of understand that, but a Pruitt, I don't get this at all.
So, Dan, are you saying that he should be out?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that there has been a string of mild corruptions throughout the Trump cabinet, all the way from mild to being egregious. And I think that sooner or later, it's almost they just pile on top of each other till it's just like enough with these things. But as far as the president's concerned, I think that he is in such an embattled position that he views people who are his people, that he doesn't care what they do because he thinks everything's holistically unfair and nothing's absolutely true. And so therefore, screw everyone else. That's my guy. He deserves a great pat on the back.
Ken?
Okay. I think Pruitt is trying to work himself out of the job, and I hope he works himself out of a job very quickly by shutting down the EPA. Clearly, the EPA has basically been working itself out of a job for a couple of decades now, because they have a law that states that if the states have more restrictive laws than what the federal does, that the federal EPA will back out and permit the state agencies to take over.
Kevin?
The Democratic Party stands for environmental protection. It's a key component of our community here locally with the beaches, and it's, of course, a very important issue. It isn't, I think if you look at Scott Pruitt, he was the Oklahoma Attorney General. When he comes to Washington, he brings his staff with him. He gets those staffers raises, five-figure raises. Then he has a lobbyist who he rents an apartment
Kevin,
from. And now he's a good old boy where he has them walk his dog and pick up his...
set the standard here. Let's look at Michelle Obama's friends who were paid hundreds of millions of dollars for setting up the internet for Obamacare, and there was nothing wrong with that. But Pruitt comes along and he wants his own staff.
I've never heard of that before.
You know, we
live in a world now. We live in a world now where you can just say whatever you want, and that's news.
Right. I
guess if you're a Democrat, you can say whatever you want, and it's the truth,
Ken,
and it's not.
What does that have to do with Mr. Pruitt having aides pick up his dry cleaning?
As I said, the Obamas set the standard. So a Republican comes in and wants to pay an aide $100 for picking up his laundry, but Michelle Obama can pay hundreds of millions of dollars to her friends to setting up the internet for Obamacare.
Okay.
But
Let's fact check.
Democrats have set the standard.
Alan, let's fact check.
Okay.
That's not true. And the Pruitt issue is true because those staffers have now left the office and testified that they did so.
I want to start on one fairly local issue involving the governor's race and the news that came out today with Adam Putnam, who is the Republican Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the front runner for the Republican gubernatorial nomination. He is also in charge, his office, of doing background checks for those who are applying for concealed carry permits in Florida. And it turns out that for the last year, no one was actually doing those background checks because somebody who works there couldn't log on to the federal system for doing so. Dan, what was your reaction to that?
My reaction, this is typical Adam Putnam. Here's an individual who is a central trust fund baby, a person who was elected to the Florida House at 2 years old. He literally has a cat named after his family in Putnam County, and his time as Agriculture Commission has been a disaster. I mean, the citrus industry is down 80% since Putnam has been Ag Commish. We're going to have to take the orange off our license plates. I don't know what we're going to put on there. Maybe a gun.
Dan, that is, well, you digress there to other issues, but former Congressman David Jolly, the Republican from Pinellas County, tweeted today, wow, this is the type of a story that could legitimately end a campaign. Ken, in the very least, I mean, it shows a measure of incompetence at the Agriculture Department that you were not doing background checks on those who are applying for concealed carry permits. What could be more dangerous?
What this shows is more media hysteria, and they've got the facts wrong. The fact of the matter is it was non-criminal background checks that the employee did not follow through on, allegedly because he could not log in. The criminal background checks, there were two separate systems that were used to check them. A beat was never missed on those. So,
Ken, they were supposed to log on to the federal system for doing background checks, and that was not done.
And the employee was fired as soon as the office found out. All of the applications were reviewed, and so are you able to point out to me one application, one non-criminal application that got through that resulted in harm to anyone?
That's the point. We don't know. Here's the facts.
So,
Adam,
Kevin, I'm going to let you finish that, but we do have to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment. And our guest joined us right now for final thoughts, and Ken was just talking about how the whole thing with Adam Putnam and the Department of Agriculture that was supposed to do background checks on concealed carry permits, apparently it's not been done for over a year. They seem to have lost the federal logon. Kevin, what was your reaction?
well, the biggest issue is that in 2016, Adam Putnam held a press conference touting the record number of concealed carry permits that were issued that year. That was the same year that the Pulse nightclub massacre happened where 40 were killed in Orlando. That person did have a concealed carry permit. Of course, we have Parkland now. It's just, for me, it's incompetence, and that's what happens when you have one-party rule. We have one-party rule right now in Tallahassee. There's no checks and balances. We have one-party rule here in the county. The Democrats are simply asking the voters, give us a chance.
Okay, we wanted to get to one other subject that's been on a lot of people's minds, and that is the NFL. The president this week disinviting the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles to the White House because a number of them, a lot of them, didn't want to show up. Dan, I know you have your finger on the sports world. I was wondering what your reaction is, including to the fact that to emphasize the story, the Fox News channel used video of the Eagles kneeling, but it was in prayer way before the national anthem. It had nothing to do with it. Some might argue that would be fake news.
Yeah, no, I think it just highlights the media's sometimes its lack of research into a photo, just like the immigrants in cages that they allege took place under the Trump administration. And secondly, Ronald Reagan started sports teams going to the White House, a Republican president. Donald Trump. Hopefully he ends sports teams going to the White House, a Republican president. I just don't think there's any room for them to be there. It's a place of policy. It's a place to be serious. You only get 4 years, 8 years if you're lucky. And frankly, I hope that they spend all that time actually doing work, policy, foreign policy, economic development, immigration, things of that nature. I don't think that there needs to be celebrities walking through the hallways and skateboarding through it like Tony Hawk did.
Fair enough. Ken, I'm sorry, your reaction?
Haven't watched an NFL game since October of 2016. I don't ever intend to do it again. But this is just great strategy on Trump's part. He lets the media follow something like a sports team not coming to the White House. And in the meantime, he's out here doing the good business of the public.
You get a quick last
Well, I
word.
do agree with Ken on the sleight of hand with the media following this story, but I will say that I do feel sorry for a local Republican state committee man who was an Eagles fan who had planned to attend that ceremony.
I think his name is Christian Ziegler.
And I'm sure he's a little bit torn now with this president and what happened.
All right, thanks
I
a
would
lot.
add Christian's torn.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's show on sports gambling. A few months ago, the Supreme Court ruled banning sports gambling was unconstitutional. Florida hasn't made a decision yet. The voters will decide in November when it's put on the ballot. We went to Facebook for your thoughts. And Robin says, I don't care about the pros and cons. I just don't think it's the government's business if someone adult wants to gamble. And Donna says, Florida lottery, gambling, racing innocent greyhounds, gambling. Is there a difference? Am I missing something? Well, if you join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Kevin Griffith is with the Sarasota Democratic Party. Ken Piper is the treasurer of the Manatee Republican Party. And Dan Maduri is with 820 Florida Live in Tampa.